check the speaker. Perfect. Great.
Ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Hi, everybody. In case anybody doesn't know yet, I'm Ashley Witzenberger, the director of Montpelier Alive, and I just want to say thank you so much. We had an amazing, amazing turnout for all of our branding meetings, and it's such a better quality when you guys are all involved, and so I thank you so much. And I thank you for being here tonight. And I also just want to say thanks to Tripp and to Ben. I think most of you know them now, from Arnett Muldrow Associates. They have become friends over the past few days, and I'm going to be sad to see them leave when they have to go, but I'm really excited.
Oh, we'll be back.
I know. Can't shake that easy.
That's right.
And so I'm really excited for you guys to see what they've come up with. And without further ado, Tripp and Ben.
Great. Thanks, Ashley. It's a real pleasure. It's great to see so many familiar faces. For those of you who didn't see us, we've had the privilege of working all over the state of Vermont, and we've always been somewhat envious of the chance to work here in Montpelier, the capital city. So it's a real thrill to be here. It's a real thrill to be here this evening. What we're going to do, I go through the boring part of the presentation, which is the zip code data and the market analysis. And I know Richard Amore from the state is in the audience somewhere who will be making faces at me if I go too long, and then Ben will eventually throw something at me if I go too long. Because the real purpose of this is to use that marketing data then to help inform some of the things that we talk about in Ben's marketing and image building piece of this. So I'll do a handoff to him later on. We worked with merchants here in Montpelier to conduct a zip code survey. It was extremely successful. We had 19 merchants participate. We recently did one in Middlebury. We had exactly 19 participate there as well. They did about 2,100 customer visits. You all recorded 3,100 customer visits. Those customer visits represent 633 unique American zip codes that passed through this community in a 7-day period. Among the communities we work, this puts you in the top 10 that we've ever done work in as far as having number of American zip codes passing through. Those zip codes represent 42 states, Puerto Rico, and the District of Columbia. They represent 5 Canadian provinces, and they represent 11 foreign countries and 6 continents across the world. We did not have someone from Antarctica show up.
That's our target market.
And I will tell you, yes, you did not get the golden North Dakotan. That's the elusive creature that we never seem to find in any of our market studies. But nevertheless, it is really neat to see that kind of data. Certainly that's impressive. It's neat to see that. At the end of the day, 40% of the customers recorded a Montpelier zip code. So those of you who talk about, say, we shop local, we spend money local, we talk the talk, you're walking the walk. And it's evident in this slide here that 40% recorded a Montpelier 05602 zip code. My little labels are a little bit off, but East Montpelier is the red, the red sliver here, another 4%, Barry 6%, the green sliver here, and then you have Waterbury, Moortown, Worcester, Northfield, Plainfield, and then Chittenden County as a whole represents about 3%. We wanted to sort of pull the Chittenden County out just to see what it was. The rest of Vermont is about 15%. That's the area where things start to get fuzzy as to, are they a visitor? Are they doing business here? Are they tourists? Are they, there's a line drawn. When I see someone from Rutland, maybe they're transacting business, maybe they're a visitor, maybe they're up here, who knows? It could be a combination of things, and visitor is a tough term to use. But having that 15% is neat to see. And then the true visitor, Canadians, 2%, residents in New York and Massachusetts, 3% each. In working in Church Street Marketplace, we saw a very similar trend where Canadians represented about 2%. New York and Massachusetts were about 3.5%, 4%. You're mirroring a little bit of what we saw on Church Street Marketplace, which I always get a kick out of because we talk a lot about Canadians, but we tend to overemphasize how much they come. My only hypothesis to that is that they talk different than we do, whereas the New Yorker and the Massachusetts resident, unless they're from South Boston, talk fairly similar. But when you have someone speaking French, they're obviously not from, right around the corner. So
we all talk different than you do.
yes, and I appreciate you bringing that out ahead of time because when we looked at the other states, we are clearly recognizable when we're shopping in Montpelier. And it was great. It's very rare for me to see my own zip code, so I'm trying to figure out who it is that was up here during that time. And then the other countries that we mentioned represent 1% of the market. The trade areas indicate where you're most, and this is where we sort of shift and talk about the raw customer, the raw data, to where your most loyal customers are, where your most reliable customers come from. And what we're doing here is looking at both primary trade area and secondary trade area, and we're compensating for the population inside those zip codes. As you know, East Montpelier is a much smaller population zip code than is the population of the Montpelier zip code. So when we do that, I come up with this remarkably semi-confusing chart, and we're trying to look at visits per 1,000 residents, and that visits per 1,000 residents gives us an indicator of how loyal the customers are. And so clearly 05602 is the most loyal, 1,278 visits out of the 3,000 I mentioned, 110 visits per 1,000 residents. That population is for the zip code, which is why it doesn't match what you traditionally think of as the city's population. East Montpelier, 67 visits per 1,000 people, 43 visits, and then we see a pretty big jump there before you get to Moortown from 43 to 24. Anyone who does market analysis, if they try and tell you it's a science, they're lying. It's a little bit of voodoo and a little bit of mixing potions in the back room and trying to figure out where to draw some of these lines. We could have drawn the line just at Montpelier and then said the rest was secondary trade area. I figured let's go ahead and throw the other two in. We're not really going to add a whole lot of massive amount of retail. We'll add a few more consumers and we'll see how the numbers shake out. You do see, though, I think it's important to note that Waterbury and Barry, 19 visits per 1,000, Barry, 11 visits per 1,000. Waterbury, 11 visits per 1,000. Very similar pattern that we would see when we worked in Waterbury and we worked in Barry, that there's sort of a pretty big drop-off of customer loyalty of Montpelier residents coming to Waterbury, Montpelier residents coming to Barry. So it's not that they're sliding you. There are some sort of lines that are drawn that people don't often cross when we look at some of these markets. I did put Chittenden County in because you had 103 visits from the county, but that, with the size of the county, represents only 0.6 visits per 1,000 residents. And certainly that doesn't mean that you don't market to them, but it means that when we start running our numbers, we don't need to run Chittenden County numbers, that it operates really as an independent market. And so really when we're looking at your primary and secondary trade area, we're looking at a market that works together. Even though you may not always cross the lines, there are certain instances where you are crossing the lines lines to get things that you simply can't get inside this local market. You're tending to go to these adjacent markets nearby. When we look at the next, we're looking at retail leakage. These are charts that will make your eyes go cross, but it does help affirm some things that I think you all, that were evident in the pie chart, but that you all probably intuitively know. We're looking at local dollars being spent as that compares to what stores sell. So if consumers are spending more dollars than local stores are selling, you're leaking sales. That means that those dollars are going elsewhere. If you're selling more than local consumers spend, that means that you're importing sales. And so I'm showing you the primary trade area, again, which is the 3 zip codes. We can get into the secondary trade area. I've run those numbers, but again, I don't want to get in trouble with Ben and the glamour part of the presentation. When we look at this, again, your eyes go cross, but let me just talk you through it. Those 3 zip codes comprise a $454 million retail supply. Consumers in those same zip codes are spending $255 million every year. So every year, this community imports $176 million into Montpelier. That should be fairly obvious to you all, both from the visitor standpoint, as evidenced by the pie chart, and by the influx of the legislature that comes in and spends money from the outside during session and all the activity that comes on. Your importation of dollars is not consistent across the board. You leak dollars in some categories and gain dollars in others. So you're gaining dollars in some of the automotive categories. You have automotive dealerships in the zip code. You leak dollars in the furniture category, which is an interesting one to leak dollars. You leak dollars in electronics, not a real big surprise. In building material, you leak dollars, but when we look at Berlin, Barry, those zip codes, they gain dollars. So your dollars are sort of getting traded out because you're going over there to buy your building supplies and things like that. Food and beverage, you're selling more than local consumers can spend. It makes a lot of sense. It goes back to, even though Northfield we're not considering part of your primary trade area, we know full well that Northfield residents are not shopping at Tops every day, that they're driving into Onion River Co-op to do some of their shopping. They're probably doing some of their shopping at Shaw's here. They're probably very likely doing some of their shopping at Shaw's in Berlin as well. So your food and beverage is importing. You're also importing some dollars in pharmacies. You do well in gasoline stations, which, you know, not exactly the most glamorous downtown use, but if you're on Memorial Drive, you know the preponderance of being able to fill up your car. You do this really interesting thing with clothing, which is something I'm not really used to seeing. You sort of alternate between leaking and gaining and leaking and gaining in the clothing categories. Usually a town this size is a pretty consistent leaker in clothing sales, and you're actually a net gainer in clothing sales, which is a pretty neat opportunity for you to capitalize on and continue to market. Things like jewelry, you gain sales, and then we get into things like sporting goods where you gain sales. You certainly leak sales when we get into the general merchandise categories, having no big box kind of discount retailer. That's going to Berlin. As you would expect. They're doing a gain in that. The other part, wrapping up, and I'll quit on the eye-crossing slides, is as you might expect, you are a significant gain market in full-service dining. And you're a significant loss market in limited service dining. And the real difference between the two is you're standing up when they ask you if you want fries with that at limited service dining, and you're sitting down when they ask you if you want fries or salad. So the quick service, as you all know, famously, this is the only state capital in the union without a McDonald's. The fact that you don't have quick service restaurants plays out in the numbers that we have here. By contrast, when you look at Barry, Berlin, that market, they certainly do a very good job in the quick service categories. In the end, your Montpelier customers, I love it when I see a local market base that says they shop local and then demonstrate it by showing up with their feet in the doors. That's really important. I think part of the marketing strategy that Ben's going to be talking about is one that communicates clearly to locals and clearly to visitors as well. Because we can't rely just on that. We've got to rely on that local consumer. We've got to rely on that regional consumer. You're serving a pretty big hinterland that, really stretches pretty far. It's very intertwined. I think as much as we like to say they're barriers, but what's offered in Berlin, a lot of that's not offered here. Some of what's offered in Waterbury is something that, you're going back and forth between some of those. What's offered in Barry, all those trade-offs is functioning as a region. It's not overlapping Chittenden to the degree that maybe we might have expected, but seeing it as a separate market to me is a good thing. It means that really it is a market that's operating with its own sphere. That doesn't mean you all aren't going to Trader Joe's periodically. I know you are, maybe one or two of you. But it does mean that the market should not be viewed as one giant, like super metro where the whole thing crisscrosses one another. Although the local market is critical, tourism and visitors are essential. If we take that 15 to 20% out, the stores and restaurants here would not be successful, and you as a local market would not enjoy the kind of breadth and depth of options that you have. So the visitors that come are critical to the success of these, and that puts you in both a luxurious position, but it also puts you in the position where you can't just market to the local. You've got to market to the regional. You've got to market to the visitor. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ben. That's my last one, and let you talk through some of the existing things that are going on. I think I'll come back on in just a little bit. Okay.
Okay, great. Well, one of the things we always like to start with is we like to start by looking at the things that exist. And I think that's probably an exercise that not a lot of folks here in Montpelier have ever done, is looking at all the different logos that existed that had no relationship to each other at all. And in addition to that, even some of the habits that the community had gotten into in terms of every year, you might actually redesign an event logo every single year. And that's pretty typical. That happens a lot, especially with events that are run by volunteers, because they get tired and they want a fresh look. But we have to always remember that we got to think about the consumers and that consistency of communication to the consumers. So this is just a couple. This is the Montpelier Alive organizational logo, and they had an organizational variation that they also use in social media, which is the square version. And this is a good example of how with this recent 15-year celebration that they had, they did a really, really good job of using colors and using typeface to create connectivity between the organization and the event. Now, in addition to that, there have been some really cool things that have been happening throughout the community. A recent high school graduate developed a new brand identity for the high school, and they're currently working inside the school district to not only figure out how they might be able to adopt that as kind of an academic identity for the high school, but also create some branding district-wide and be able to better capture that educational institution as a market and something that the community as a whole should market for growth. So we wanted to pay consideration to that work that had been done. And then, of course, we also had to look at some of the varieties of all the different things that existed already. So we've got, again, organizational logos. We've got things like Capital City Cash. We've got Parks and Rec Department, different initiatives, different event logos, reoccurring amenities like the farmers market. So you can see all these things have their own unique identity, and there's very, very few threads that connect those dots. Now, you know, we don't expect everyone to be forced to look exactly alike. That's not the way it works. But when an organization has the ability to influence the look and feel and message of a lot of different events, then it only makes sense for them to bring that in underneath the umbrella. And we had the unique opportunity here to not only look at Montpelier Alive, but also look at the city itself as an entity, a governmental body, and then start to create a system that can grow and expand from there. Now, one of the things that we always like to focus in on is figuring out where we start from a message standpoint. And that message was the thing that as we sat through stakeholder meeting after stakeholder meeting, you had no problem whatsoever listing your amenities, your values, your qualities. You had no problem at all creating long lists of things that you were proud of. But then we also heard loud and clear, we don't know how to tell that story. The things seem so disconnected from one another that it sometimes is difficult to be able to tell all the different facets of our story. So what we did is we crafted a narrative that we call a brand statement. And that brand statement is an opportunity to start stitching those together and then setting the stage for a graphic communication system. And I'm going to let Tripp read that for you now.
And before I read it, I do want to take into account that a comment we heard at the public meeting the other night, and that was, why do we need a tagline? And we really mulled over that a lot and took that to heart. And we're actually suggesting that you don't necessarily have a tagline per se, but that you have a consistent message that you're sending. And so we are steering clear of this whole tagline notion. There are some phrases that you see that are repetitive that can be used, but we really don't want to condense it down into something clever, cute, or precious. We really don't think the community needs that kind of preciousness. This is too diverse, too dynamic, and your role in the state is a serious role. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean that we can't take that serious role and embrace all the different assets that come together. But as far as it sort of coming together in a 3 or 4 word catchphrase, we're really not heading in that direction. So I'll read for you the brand statement. It says, every day we serve the people of the Green Mountain State. As the seat of Vermont's government, the decisions made in this smallest of capitals impacts the entire state. Leaders who started here have gone on to become national figures, yet they remain tied to this place we call home. Most importantly, decision makers here are our neighbors and friends. You might bump into the governor at a local restaurant, a senator enjoying the farmer's market, and the mayor on a stroll through downtown. Here we practice democracy in personal form, are not afraid to disagree without being disagreeable, and the product of our work is a community that can make all Vermonters proud. Every day we serve up the arts. We offer an artistic environment on the caliber of much larger cities. Whether it is a showing of an independent film, a live production on stage, artists in our galleries, and sculpture in the street, art infuses our everyday life. We celebrate the arts with festivals and welcome with open arms the talented students that come here to learn for the Vermont College of Fine Arts. Every day we serve up the fine food and drink, of a state renowned for our connection of farm and table. Our restaurants are an eclectic mix of fine dining and casual fare, where cuisine, both familiar and exotic, come together. Our farmers market is a showcase of the bounty of our land, and as home of the New England Culinary Institute, we're a place where the culinary arts are honed each day. Every day we serve up customer service. We are the largest collection of independent businesses in central Vermont. Our downtown harkens to a time when a grocer, a hardware store, and a pharmacist were staples in the community. Add to this our specialty shops, where one-of-a-kind finds are offered in an array of places that would rival the shopping in some of America's most sophisticated downtowns. Every day we serve up recreation. It is in this capital city that you can go on a hike on the mountain behind the gilded dome of the State House, hop on a bike path or off-road trail in the heart of downtown, enjoy parks unrivaled in beauty, and can be on the slopes in the time it takes most folks to get out of their neighborhood. We cherish the outdoors and continually look for ways to preserve our environment in innovative ways. Every day we serve our young people. We cherish our children and know that in a world that is changing, our community is still a place where kids can walk downtown and neighbors look after neighbors. We're deeply proud of our schools where our children not only learn, but also become engaged as citizens in this most unique of places. Every day, Montpelier serves. People come here to do the work of the people, to take care of one another. We do it with pride in the Green Mountain State. Ours is a city that combines the ideals of that Americans cherish in a small town and couples those ideals with innovation and energy rarely found in a community of 8,000. We invite you to visit, experience, or stay in Montpelier, America's small town capital, and a place where we serve Vermont daily. So that's sort of the brand statement, the sort of piece that we're looking at to describe the community. Each one of these components can be used to describe further great facets of who you are as a place. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Bill.
Right.
Here, and since I'm done.
Yeah, I love that he writes so well. Makes my job easier. You know, that document really symbolizes our attempt to bring together all the things that the stakeholders said during that input process, because those are the things, they're the passion points. They're the things that the citizens of your community said loud and clear they're willing to stick up for. They want to make sure that no matter what the future looks like, these are the values that we want to see preserved as we become the Montpelier of tomorrow. So with that, we started out by looking at the city itself. And, you know, one of the things that we always try to do is we try to express the importance of understanding that a city logo is very, very different from a community identity. The city is made up of elected officials. They pass taxes. Sometimes, believe it or not, they tick people off. They don't pick up trash right on time, or snow doesn't get plowed in a way that a citizen sees fit. And then all of a sudden, that becomes the identity of the place. We wanted to create something and set the stage with a very, very simple identity system. One of the things that we noticed as we went through is currently the city really has two different graphics that they use. They have a graphic that you could see on the doors of vehicles that they have and those type things. And then they also have a very historic formal seal. And that formal seal, actually both logos have imagery of the State House on them. And that only makes sense. Thank goodness I kind of came into the community and I was like, man, I love to see that, because a lot of times we might work in county seats and they'll have a glorious, courthouse in the heart of their downtown. Oh, but the courthouse is the county, not the city. You're not allowed to touch that. Don't use that as your image. But it seems like historically, Montpelier has always been proud of that role that it plays, and very proud of the image that State House conveys. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to clean up and preserve that seal. That's a very important tool for them to be able to continue to use. It's a tool that honestly, that graphic should be able to last 100 years. It's not the type thing that needs to be redesigned over and over again. And it represents the formal actions of the government. But then we simply wanted to introduce the new typeface and just a simple, clean version of that dome so they can begin to use this system to kind of make things clean and easy. So here we introduce the base typeset. Now you can't really see it, but this is actually a very, very rich green. And the green was pulled out of a photo that I took of the State House. So I pulled that green directly from the trees behind it, and then as well as the gold from the dome. Now, that dome, the gold of the dome is kind of funny, and if you know anything about the history of it, before it was gilded, it was red. And you can imagine how differently that architectural structure would look on the skyline of Montpelier, having a red painted dome instead of that gilded dome. I think they did that back in like 1907 or so. So here what we see is we see three different variations. First of all, you can see every time we're doing this, we're taking the name Montpelier, we're tying city of with it, so very prominently, so you know you're talking about the identity. This says City of Montpelier and it's got Vermont. Then this one introduces that moniker that Tripp introduced in the brand statement, America's small town capital. Now, that is simply, it's almost like a position statement. It is a twofold statement that allows you at the same time to proudly proclaim that you are the smallest capital in the country, and that's not going to change anytime soon. You would have to almost double your population to get close to Pierre, North Dakota. So, you're in good shape. That position of prominence that you have is very set. But the thing that's nice about it is by celebrating in that way, it connects with some of the things that you told us during those meetings. We're small by design. We're not small by failure. We're not small because we couldn't figure out how to grow. We're small because this is the size we want to be. So being able to celebrate that allows you to really kind of capture that essence that we heard was a pride point from the citizens. But then, in addition to that, it also connects with something else that we heard over and over again. America's small town capital. You set the benchmark for small town life. I would argue that it would be difficult to find any other community of 8,000 people that have the collection of businesses and cultural amenities that this community has. You're a community that is much larger than its population, and it gives you that opportunity to kind of celebrate that standard that you have. Somebody said the other day, it's like you kind of walk around and wonder where Norman Rockwell is. And
again, to reiterate, this is not necessarily a tagline. It's just a rephrasing of what you already say.
Exactly.
The smallest state capital in the Union is using those exact same phrasing, but a little different selection of words and putting it in a little bit different order so that as you say it, if you say it to someone who lives in Denver, say, well, we're the smallest state capital in the Union, they might think, oh, well, I've been to small towns, and there must not be much to do there. But if you sort of switch it up slightly, it gives that whole notion of, well, not only are we this, but we're pretty good at what we do as far as being a small town.
Great. And I shared with Tripp, I live in Delaware now, and I was able to work with their capital, Dover, to go through a rebranding process. And when I came in, to be honest, the thing that they were using really kind of irritated me, because they proudly would proclaim that we're the capital of the first state. Okay, so you infer that by being the first state, that carries with it prominence, and then since you're the capital of it, that means that you're special. But that's kind of a cop-out. You haven't really said anything. You know, what are you? What do you stand for? And that small town value that we heard you all say over and over was something that really kind of excited us. So I love how that allows us to kind of spin that message. Now, that really is that city government. And what we're going to do from this base line is we're going to go through and we're going to use a design standard to begin to look at departmental identities. You have some departments that kind of exist under that umbrella. Then you have other departments in the city that are more outreach oriented. You have things like the senior center and parks and rec, where they might have a little bit of a unique variation all their own. But eventually what this is going to grow into is a system that truly connects all those departments within the city. Now, the next thing that we want to look at, though, is we talked about this as an organizational logo. But if we're going to do that, we also need to introduce a destination logo. And for this, we're creating a downtown logo, and we're using that same silhouette of the dome because it only makes sense. I mean, it literally is the gold that pops out of the green that surrounds the Green Mountain State. It is so unbelievably impactful to someone that comes into the community that it makes sense to be the image. But what we wanted to do was we wanted to create a graphic variant that almost changed it up and instantaneously made it not literal. We created a multicolored kind of faceted background as the introductory texture that we put in there, and we created a 6-color palette that were drawn directly from the photos that I took in your downtown. So the color palettes are derived from the colors that make up downtown as it is. So we see the kind of simple variation here. The nice thing about the word Montpelier, nobody's ever let us change the name, so we had to kind of deal with the name as it is. But what it does is with this descender of the P, it gives us a great space underneath the baseline to put that modifier. It also gives us this really nice space between the M and the L to kind of drop in that downtown variation. We have a horizontal version, a stacked vertical version. We're showing how we can simplify those down as one color and reversed out versions. And then even showing how we're kind of taking this campaign that Tripp introduced, this concept of Vermont served daily. And that duality of not only talking about the role that Montpelier plays in serving all the citizens of Vermont, but also that platform to be able to talk about the diversity of experience that you offer up. And I'll show you how that kind of materializes here in a second. But from there, we need to jump over again to another organizational logo, and that is the Montpelier Alive logo. Now, Montpelier Alive, their old logo was very attractive. There wasn't anything wrong with it at all. But it did two things. First of all, it focused purely on literal imagery from downtown. Had a fork and a spoon and an onion in one, had a clock tower in one, you know, pretty typical imagery that you might see. But we don't need the logo of this organization to do the same thing that it was doing before. Before, not only was it the organizational logo, but it was also the logo that was used to promote downtown. We have a replacement for that now. So with the the Montpelier Alive logo, we now have the opportunity to really focus on this organizational identity and start to create the sense of an organization that's building vitality in the community. So what we did was we wanted to highlight that word alive. I'm not sure, I've got a second slide that I don't know if I even made it in there, but this is where we do have a tagline, a dreaded tagline. We actually have two. There are two focus statements for this organization. The first is enriching life daily. And then the second is enhancing business daily. So if you serve on the board of this organization, whenever you decide to take your resources and invest them in an activity, you can very simply run that through a very quick filter. Is it either enriching life or enhancing business or both? Those are the things that we want Montpelier Alive to do for this community. We really want it to be able to position itself as this economic development entity here in the community. So we see this primary logo here where we've used the exact same word type, exact same typography. We were so unbelievably clever that we could figure out we could put the dome in the A, which all of a sudden just makes it amazing right now. I mean, it's not rocket science, but that consistency allows you to start to build that identity and that consistent image into all these different identities. Here over to the side, we can even see a version of what a social media icon might look like. We've tested it out with a more simplified but still full-color logo, one-color logo, black and white, reverse, showing how this might look in stationery, letterhead, business cards, being able to convey this really professional, bold identity for this organization, and then being able to show how it might make its way into marketing materials, a brochure, a guide to downtown, things like that. Now, where it gets fun, though, is when we move into what we call brand extension. And brand extension is now that we've got this destination and these organizational identities, we start to take it into the events. Because the events are the ways that our visitors and our locals truly interact. And they create this really, really positive experience. But many times we create them in this vacuum so that positive brand equity doesn't actually get deposited back into the perception of downtown, but stays in a silo of the event itself. So what we're going to show here is we're going to show kind of a series of different initiatives and organizations and events. We had one, we talked with the bike committee, and they were like, can you do a logo that just says Bike Montpelier? Well, absolutely. Because of this graphic standard, it makes it unbelievably easy to add and expand. The sidewalk sale. Again, unbelievably clever. You can use a dollar sign for an S, right? You know, it was funny, I was asking about the old one because the old sidewalk sale logo's got balloons, and I just asked Ashley, I said, so does that mean that like all the people that are participating put balloons out on the racks on the sidewalk or whatever? And she was like, ooh, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, they do.
Good. Oh, good, okay, perfect. You know, even talking about initiatives like zero waste initiatives, being able to tie all of these goals of different initiatives and connect them together to the same system. We heard about a great initiative that the parking committee and the biking committee have kind of talked about together, and it's called POP, Park on the Perimeter. And again here, take a stroll daily. This is a way that we can communicate to our own citizens about, you know, and I will say, I'm not sure if you've heard this yet or not, but some people in town think Montpelier has a parking problem. And, you know, we talked about all different variations of that, but the big thing that I'll tell you is once I started to dig in with folks, and I think Andrew or somebody made a great point. It's like, visitors don't really complain about parking because visitors have a higher level of motivation. And yeah, exactly. So, you know, a lot of times it's those locals. It's the locals that they're in a convenience mindset. You know what? I need to go where I need to go and get what I need to get and then get on to the next place I need to go to get what I need to get. So, you know, all of the vibrancy gets in the way of productivity. Well, I really don't think that we want it to be so unbelievably easy that at any point in the day, you could be able to park directly in front of the business that you need to go to when you need to go there. If that's the case, I'm pretty sure that the vibrancy that we love about downtown Montpelier wouldn't exist. But being able to have initiatives where you tie in the pre-existing focus on healthy living, being connected to your community, with things like this where just simply enhancing that concept of, you know what, just kind of take a stroll. Make a task into something a little bit more enjoyable. That couple of extra minutes might actually do you good. And then, of course, if you need to play hardball, you can take the aerial photo of Berlin Mall and drop it on top of downtown and show that, walking from JCPenney to Walmart is the same distance as going all the way across town. But people's minds just work different like that. So again, you've got initiatives like that. You've got consistent ways that you can convey events. July 3rd. This is probably one of the coolest events that I've ever heard of, Flannel Friday. I absolutely love that. So many people lately so many communities have simply jumped on the American Express Small Business Saturday bandwagon, and they have allowed Friday to be given to the major chains. And when I heard that concept of Flannel Friday, I was like, that is the absolute perfect Vermont event. Like, whoever came up with that gets some gold flaky stars, because that's a really, really solid concept. Moonlight Madness, again, what we've done is through this typeface, the color palette, and the approach to graphics, we have created an unbelievably simple platform that makes it easy for you to expand, so that you're not constantly wasting your precious volunteer resources in committee discussing what this year's logo is going to look like. Having different, I know, it's just clever. I needed to put the State House dome on the end of the snowflake. So, but again, showing how those things can fit in, your arts walk. When you have arts-oriented events, it's great to connect those. Arts Walk and Arts Fest, a lot of times the Arts Festival kind of kicks that off. So being able to have very similar approaches to design and creating this sense of series and connecting those. But then all of a sudden, what you have is you begin to have a family. And that family begins to connect, and it becomes easier and easier for the consumers to connect the dots. Now, this next slide is kind of a fun one. It's just taking a quick look at a signage system. I've got a lot more signs to do, and most of them have to do with parking. But, what I told folks during this week is, typically there are 3 different parking problems. There's a parking capacity problem, a parking management problem, and a parking awareness problem. Signage is a great way to address that parking awareness problem. So being able to tell people where parking is, consistently share with them where to go. But let me go through this real quick. We'll start over here on this side. This is a pole-mounted gateway sign. Now, typically, when we're in a community, what we like to do is we like to go and we like to announce arrival at our corporate limits. So we'll go out to our boundary, we'll put up a gateway sign, we're so glad you're here, and we don't say another thing to you. Kind of like welcoming somebody at the front door and not telling them where the bathroom is. So these pole-mounted gateway signs are ways for you to announce arrival at special places. This can be district arrivals. If you want to start to treat different districts different ways, like River Street might have its own kind of unique character. As you actually cross the river and begin to enter into downtown, you can announce those arrivals through pole-mounted gateways. We also have trailblazer signs. Here we have 2 different size trailblazer signs, and to be honest with you, your community is not going to need any more than 2 different sizes. You're going to have one that is vehicular oriented and one that is a combination vehicular pedestrian oriented. Now, typically these have 3 destinations on them. If it is far more pedestrian oriented, you can put more on them. But if it's a vehicular oriented, based off of the federal government, they like to keep that to 3. For the most part, signs like this would probably only be seen over on Memorial. And then once you take the turn and you kind of get into the downtown core, you're going to see the smaller scale. We have both pediment style and mountable building markers. We heard somebody made a comment while we were here. It's like, I'm not sure that there's a single sign outside that actually says that this is City Hall. So, things like that are things that you can kind of consider. Then also being able to look at informational kiosks. Informational kiosks are, kind of think about it, and I hate to make the allusion to the mall, but when you walk into a mall, one of the first things that you're greeted with is a directory. Now, the reason that you're greeted with that directory is so that you can know all the things that you might potentially miss out on if you only go to the store that you feel like you parked closest to get what you need and get out. These informational kiosks should be considered at what we call transition points, places where people transition themselves from being vehicular traffic into pedestrians. These are great to go in parking lots. They're great ways to welcome people. They're great ways to share that information. And, you know, you get that. You've got one of the greatest information booths of, you know, any place that I've ever worked. I love the little structure right down there on State Street. So, you know, being able to share those are really important. And then finally, simply showing street banners. I don't want to talk too much about street banners. You've got some really great banners in the community. We've seen some really attractive. There's one that I saw on State Street yesterday that was just kind of looks sketched, and it's got the State House on it, and it's got maybe the woods. It's a really cool one on, I don't know, I took a picture of it. But the thing that I do want to share about street banners is, believe it or not, street banners are far more than just pretty. Street banners can be used very strategically. They can be used to help educate people about how your downtown works. They can be used to help connect peripheral parking into your destination itself. They can help to make corridors that people might not necessarily feel comfortable walking down feel far more friendly. So be very, very strategic about those. And just remember, they're not just for aesthetics. They've got some real strategy that can be used. A lot of times what we'll do with a community like this is we might use banners in parking areas and actually use those banners to help highlight some of the things that you might experience here. And like, for example, I mean, you might even be able to get some banners out at Morse Farm in their little parking area that highlight some of the things that are in downtown and begin to make connections between draws to the community. And then from there, I always like to kind of wrap up on showing imagery of how you might tell this story and how you might market yourself. And this whole concept of you know, Vermont served daily, we want to create this platform of all these different things that you can do. So being able to kind of have this introductory ad, but then immediately kind of moving into this bold, confident look and feel where you can start to connect these dots. Stunning views, color, balance, neighbors, trends, heroes serving daily, readers. It was actually funny, after our public meeting, we got an email from one of the participants that said, if you want to see the best of Montpelier, Vermont, you need to go to the library a little bit after school lets out. And sure enough, I was over there, and I was like, good gracious, I mean, this is a popular place. So again, you know, being able to show off those amenities, it's one of those things where you have got so many fantastic offerings to your citizens. So what we feel like we've done is, with this message, with this campaign, we're creating this opportunity to tell, not only tell the variety and diversity of stories that the community has, but also make it unbelievably easy for the business community to incorporate themselves into the message. It's very easy for a business owner to figure out what their offering might be. And, you know, I will say one of the things that was great about this is typically, you know, I have a pretty short window of time to get these photos. So I've got about half a day to take photos. I have about a day to do design work. And, typically I'll do these images and people will be like, oh, those are great images. Would have been nice if there were some people on the street. And it's like, well, I don't know if I can fix that quick. Here, there were people everywhere. Typically, I'll go through, and when I do this, I'll shoot to get about 45 or 50 good shots. I shot 165 yesterday, and there are people all over them. That was really, really great to see. And it was one of those things where you could have grabbed any one of those and stuck it on the front of a brochure. So hopefully, we've been talking for right about an hour, so we'd like to kind of wrap on our end and kind of turn it over to your end. We've still got a long list of stuff that we've already identified. We've got more events that we want to work on. We've got projects that have been put on hold until this branding process went through, things like shopping and dining brochures for downtown and things like that we're excited to kind of help design. But with that, we would really love to hear your response and your thoughts. Does the strategy seem to make sense? Do you see where the platform allows the community to kind of tell its story? And even if we didn't get to necessarily cover something in one of the ads that we showed tonight, it's easy to figure out how those amenities might quickly be rolled into that exact same format. So with that, I'm going to open it up. Feel free to ask questions about any market data or brand statement as well, and Tripp and I will just kind of tag team those answers. Yes, sir.
So if you're a downtown merchant and you want to incorporate this logo, is there sort of a gatekeeper or a process for which to implement it for your store?
Absolutely, but we always try to make it as easy as possible. One of the products of this process is going to be a unified digital resource library that will be made available directly to the business owner, and it will include a style guide document. It'll include the typeface and color definitions, as well as all the digital resources for all the logo variations.
It'll also include a template for ads that you may or may not opt to use that shows if you're going to use your own brand identity as the shopkeeper, that becomes maybe a prominent placement, and then how you use the downtown placement as a secondary placement. And vice versa. I mean, it can go both ways depending on how you work with Montpelier Live or what you want to do on your own. But the idea is that you want to be able to have your own identity incorporated in, and that's why part of this design leaves enough space for that other logo, that shop logo, restaurant logo to go into play as well.
And as far as regulation on that goes, we have seen communities set up all varying scales. To be honest with you, over the years, the number of situations where anyone has abused the resources have been unbelievably minimal. In fact, I can count them on one hand. And the thing that was interesting is in some of those where the abuse happened, the stuff was never even made available publicly. So the abuse happened even though the resources weren't accessible. So, it's kind of like if somebody's got it in their mind to do something, a little sketchy, then they're gonna make a way to do it sketchy. But the thing that we really like is, like, for example, a lot of times we urge the community to make them available to the businesses not only to incorporate in their own marketing, but to consider creating their own local pride-oriented merchandise. And we kind of say if you as a business owner, let's say that you wanted to make shirts or hats or something like that, in exchange for that, all we would like is maybe a once a year report on a rough estimate of what you might have sold. So what that allows the organization to do is essentially say, look, we invested this in this process. We turned around and made the resources available to the community as a whole. And we were able to leverage this in this amount of public sector dollars that was invested in, private sector dollars invested in marketing. And this amount was brought in as actual merchandise sales to the businesses. So, pretty easy, because that's the key. We want the business community to see the value in raising the awareness and the connectivity of the community.
Question.
I think your graphics are excellent. Where will this be available on Montpelier Live website and city website, or how can we access these
what we're going to end up doing is we have a system that is a kind of cloud-based system. So it's going to live on our server so that we're able to share it and it'll never move. That's one of the things that's kind of nice about it. But then, of course, we're going to make those links available to Ashley, and she'll be able to pass that along to you.
We urge the community, like, put it on a hard drive and back it
Absolutely.
up. Because one of the things that's important is we sign over our copyright. We release all rights to anything we've created. So if you all would need to modify it, tweak it, add on to it, we're not going to come back and say, wait a minute, we've got the creative license on that. So we keep it in the cloud just for safekeeping, because we have clients from 10 years ago who
We lost our CD. We need to. So, but yeah, the process itself. Hopefully, what we'll find in terms of next steps is if we don't find a lot of feedback in terms of tweaks and redesign, then our goal is to be able to make the resources available to Ashley very, very quickly, and then that link can be distributed through the organization. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I like the idea with the wayfinding, and when you were talking about having some signs in the parking lots, made me think that I've been in other parking lots in maybe other countries where when you buy your ticket, there's a small map that says you are here, and then you know what the layout of the town
orient
is.
you.
Absolutely.
You know where you're going.
Absolutely.
And I like the use of the word served in the narrative, because it kind of made it feel like there was like a homey kind of feel to it in a nice way. But when I saw the one that said seniors served daily, I did think that you were actually serving up seniors.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I was
Right.
like, oh, I didn't know.
That's true. That's true.
I had a little bit of that reaction too. I was like, we're serving the seniors, but we're not serving them for dinner, you know? So it may be some word massaging. We need
Yeah.
to-
Yeah, that's a great point, though.
Right. There was another one that had that.
Kids.
Serving kids daily. I was like, I don't think we're like, you know, we may want you to babysit, but, you know.
Serving kids, sunny side up. No, that is a great point. That is the byproduct of last minute. Anything else?
Other thoughts?
Oh, thank you.
I think you've wowed us.
Good, good.
It feels like you're always very smart.
Well, and you know, the thing that we always like to share with folks is, you know, well, first of all, if you were able to meet with us at all, I hope that one of the things you take away from this is that we love our work and we take it seriously, and we also love Vermont. Tripp I think he would move here tomorrow. I think both of us would if we didn't have children at all. We might figure out how to make that. I know it is, but
It's the ex-wives. That's the
yes,
problem.
yeah, it is. The nature of traveling consultants, those dang ex-wives. But you know, we feel like there's tremendous power in simplicity, and we think that a lot of times what ends up happening is we overcomplicate things. Montpelier is one of the smartest communities I've ever been to. The citizens that we met with, the grasp that they have on the assets that they have is really, really admirable. And there seems to be a hunger among the people here to see things happen. They love where they live, and they want it to be a place that they continue to really love. They want that fire to burn as bright as it is today. And you know, so we're excited about the recommendations because we feel like it's a simple platform to deploy, and it is something that can truly build some visual awareness and really kind of create some you know, connection between dots that sadly people don't necessarily connect on their own.
And let me talk through some tactical things as this moves ahead. Certainly we're eager for feedback, like fixing some grammatical things that don't quite ring true. There may be some graphic things that you want us to look at. There's some additional items that Ben needs to develop. But we would also encourage you, this is one on television, And two, we are also recording it and we'll upload it to YouTube so the presentation can be viewed in both formats. We really would strongly encourage you, particularly those who were not here tonight, oftentimes when they see snippets of something like this, they actually don't get the whole breadth of what we were working on over the past 3 days. So we'd encourage you to send them to see the video, to go online, or to see the show, and review the presentation and hear the Q&A, because it helps sort of paint the entire picture.
Right.
Because oftentimes the messages that get sent out in snippets they only tell a little tiny piece of the story.
Right. And we've eaten up an hour and a half of your life that you can't give back. Those suckers that didn't show up tonight, like, they don't deserve the same opinion, and they got to go through the same work you did and listening to the same stuff. So, but no, I mean, it's, I agree with what Tripp said. You know, sadly, I cannot tell you how many times when the recommendations make the rounds through the community with the the people that only know part of the story. Yeah, I had a couple semi-words that I decided not to say. But, you know, what ends up happening is we end up seeing the process grind to a halt. And the thing that is so sad is I cannot tell you how many times when it starts to roll back up, it rolls with no edits. It literally rolls the way that it was recommended. And the thing that kills us about that is what that means is that time that was spent in this kind of grinding to a halt was time we weren't implementing. It's time wasted with resources that didn't end up getting honed. We're all for refinements. We actually, you know, being able to kind of hear the level of things that you honed in on tonight makes us feel fantastic, because if you're sitting there calling out headlines that didn't feel exactly right, that means that you're not sitting there saying, I think you guys are idiots. So that's a pretty good win for us. So we all thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah, just, it might be, when you hear about this process, it might be easy to think that, oh geez, we're gonna get something out of a can. And that is not at all what we got.
Oh, thank you.
Your branding statement and the stuff, I attended a couple of the meetings and you got it. I mean, everything, you listened to what everybody said and you got it in there, and I think that's fantastic.
Thank you so much.
So, good on you. And the second thing is that I want to remind everybody, this is because of DID right here. This would not have happened without our downtown improvement district.
Great point. Great point.
So thank you to everybody who contributed to help with that, and thank you to Montpelier Alive for getting this done.
It's been a real pleasure. I know we'll be back, even if not on business, we'll be back on pleasure, because we always stop by.
Consultants serve daily.
Exactly. There we go. There we
We're
go.
happy to drink a beer at 3 pennies.
Yeah. All right. We don't want to stand between you and dinner any longer. Thank you so much for coming out. Thanks for your time this evening. And
Be
we
on the
look.
lookout for this link. We'll get it over to Ashley ASAP so you can pull it off the website.
Board members, can you head to the back of the office? We have a quick meeting.